I am very happy to introduce our next speaker. James Whelton is an Irish computer coder, venture capital advisor, and co founder of CoderDojo, a network of free computer clubs for children. So I am delighted to hand you over to James, who will speak with us here today.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here. Let me just see if I can do this, share my screen properly for my slides. Hopefully, there we go. That should be going correctly. First off, it's a privilege to be here, and thank you so much for having me. I'm a really big fan of the Undergraduate Awards, and I want to congratulate everybody that's here. It's really a tremendous thing to be a part of. I'm going to talk about two things today. Firstly, my story and experience as a young person who took a non-conventional route and some of the formative experiences through that. I know that we've quite a diverse crowd here today, and not everyone's in their early 20s, but hopefully there'll be something you can take from it. And secondly, I'm going to talk about carving your own path, which we'll just define as doing something that has an unknown outcome or a lot of uncertainty around it, and kind of touch on some of the points around that, around discomfort, resilience, and so on. I think it's interesting to note as well that about 9 years ago, I spoke at a Undergraduate Awards event when I was at the beginning of my journey. I was about 19 years old, and I probably sounded really pretentious back then. It just had like how short into things I was. But a lot of what I'll say today would have been, I think, useful for a 19-year-old me. And despite all my trials and tribulations, the real tragedy of that night was that there's no good photo that I could find that didn't make me look like I needed a serious amount of vitamin D. So to quickly just talk about who I am, I'm from Cork, Ireland, the cradle of Western civilization. I have a background in technology. I started building like websites when I was about 9, but don't come from like my family weren't into technology whatsoever. My dad avoided getting broadband for as long as possible so that I wouldn't spend too much time on the computer. But throughout my career, I tried to branch into areas like strategy and operations and growth and really become a full stack entrepreneur that I could operate each part of the business and know each discipline. I've built and scaled several tech startups, mostly in e-commerce and software as a service, and worked in private equity, acquiring and selling companies. And I've done that in Europe, the US, Asia, and the Middle East. And present day, I wear many hats. I'm a partner and shareholder in several businesses, an advisor, and a very small investor as well. I'm an autodidact, which is basically how I justify to my mother every Christmas why I still haven't gone to college. As far as vanity metrics go, I was like the youngest Ashoka fella, Forbes 30 under 30, and a bunch of other stuff. I really enjoy hiking, playing Dungeons and Dragons if I haven't lost all my credibility at 1 minute and 40 seconds in. And just playing music and adventuring. And I'm pretty preoccupied with this concept of mastery of life. I only believe that we have one shot at life. How do you extract the maximum and joy from life, irrespective of the cards that you're dealt? So probably what I'm most known for is co-founding CoderDojo, which is a open source global movement of free programming clubs for young people, where young people come to learn how to make websites and games and apps and more. It's all free, all volunteer based. It was born from my personal experience of growing up and really loving building things and programming, but not having anywhere to learn or having anywhere to like a place to make friends who also were interested in this. So present day, CoderDojo has over 2,300 clubs, over 110 countries, regularly engages almost 60,000 young people, and that's thanks to about 12,000 volunteers. And throughout its lifetime, in like the 9 years that it existed, we've kind of reached, I know, several hundreds of thousands of young people. And in 2017, our foundation merged with the Raspberry Pi Foundation, who produced this inexpensive credit card-sized computers to create one of the biggest technology education organizations in the world. Present day, what I'm also working on is a platform called Conjure, which is a platform to measure, build, and maintain behaviors conducive to well-being and life satisfaction. Kind of comes about after 2 years of research and experimenting. And it came out of when I was working in e-commerce or software as a service. We basically like do so much stuff to manipulate people in our own interests, understand how much money they spend, understand how much we spend to acquire them as a customer through ads, try and get them to spend more time in the app, send all sorts of push notifications and dopamine inducing actions. And kind of coupled with what I learned about managing organizations and planning and having feedback loops and mechanisms to ensure you achieve what you want to achieve, I was wondering why we didn't apply that to our personal lives to kind of get at what we wanted out of life. So kind of hoping to achieve that with data and automation and guidance and a few other things, and build as a platform that subject matter experts can use modules and build programs on top of. So it's pretty early. It's currently invite only, but it feels very vocational to me. So I'm going to give you a very quick whistle stop tour of my life. Basically, the first part of my life up until my final year of high school, growing up, I became really passionate about technology and coding. I made my first website when I was 9 years old. And it was very frustrating because I had to be entirely self-taught. I would buy books. I wasn't actually particularly good at programming. I would suck, and it would take me a long time to figure stuff out. It's pretty lonesome because I didn't have anywhere to make friends or get guidance and whatever. But fortunately, I was also a skateboarder, so I kind of balanced that all out with hanging out in dodgy parts of town. In my final year of high school, anyway, I went through my early years building websites and games and hacking and doing a bunch of stuff. But in my final year of high school, I won this website competition, and from that won a small pink iPod Nano at the time, and then figured out how to do some stuff with it that you shouldn't be able to do, and hacked it and put that online, and the Apple fanboys went wild, and I appeared in these blogs here. And people in my school all of a sudden wanted to know how I did that. I was so academically poor. They were like, well, if that idiot James can program, then surely we all can. So I started teaching about 40 students twice a week after school on how to program. But I did it with quite a different vibe because I didn't really like school. So we were very project orientated. We optimized for having fun. And if people couldn't figure out what they wanted to make, we'd have competitions like who could make the worst website. And then soon after, people from other schools heard about it. They saw that their friends were making games and apps and wanted to do it themselves and wanted to attend. But then also, it was coming to the end of my secondary school career. And people were worried about what was going to happen once I left school, and also during the summer, if this was going to stop for like 3 months. So I was speaking at a conference while I was still in that final year of school about my hacking experience. And I met another guy at it, this half Australian, half Chinese guy who was living in Cork as well. It happened. He worked in tech investment and had done a few startups, and had a bunch of insights that I didn't have. He felt that we could get, on telling this, he felt we could get people to donate space and volunteer their time and all this. And we just agreed to try and run it outside of my school and see what happens. So the learnings from that period, and while these learnings have repeated themselves time and time throughout my life, these were kind of like the first time I was exposed to them. First one was to be prolific, to do things and put them out and move on. Despite the iPod hacking thing was the thing that got press, I'd actually been like building a bunch of apps, or I had found like a flaw in Twitter previously where I could tweet out code and it would run on the iPhone app, and none of that got picked up. So I think the mental model is that like every time you do something and put it out, it's like throwing out a fishing line or a fishing hook, and it will likely attract the right energy that you want. The second thing is that you don't know what's going to have traction, and the mental model there is like 1 out of 5 things you try is going to work. So really, you should try and get through the 4 things that aren't going to work as quickly as possible to get to the 5th thing that you will. And the last one is leveraging your unique experience. So in my case, I just happened to be given the entropy of the universe, the person who knew what it was like to self-teach programming and be a young person who was very passionate about it, but not have that outlet, and also not like school. And that was my unique experience, which translated into CoderDojo. And this is a pattern that I've seen in building businesses. What I call the subject matter expert pattern, is that you'll find somebody who's the expert in like health or in nutrition or in pillows or whatever it is, and then you'll couple with them and basically build an organization and product around that, but they'll know that problem inside out. And either you can be born into that and have that unique set of experiences, or you can invest time and go deep in an area and self-educate, which is what I've had to do in this whole world of well-being and life satisfaction and all that stuff. So then we start this first club outside of secondary school. A few weeks in, people are now traveling for like 3 hours down from Dublin each weekend, each way to attend. People wanted to replicate this coding club in their community. And so we set up a second one and a third one. Each time we would set it up, we took the learnings and iterated. We had no idea, to be honest. And we didn't start it to be this like big global thing. We just kind of rolled with it and see where it went. And as people started wanting to set up more of these clubs, we began to package it up more and remove friction from people getting involved. So this was articulating the values and vision. So we would kind of get people aligned and on board, creating lots of guides and material and hand-holding to help people set up and engage, reduce friction, manage expectations. So if people were unsure, we just say like, look, run one session, worst comes to worst, you just, give a great day out for some young people. And if you like it, then great, continue on. And then we tried to engage industry partners and kind of really like have alignment with them that what we were doing in these clubs translated to what industry needed. And for me personally, I was just chasing opportunities, traveling everywhere to try and set these up, meet people. I was brave/ignorant in that, like, I was brazenly making mistakes. I didn't actually really have any expectations on how things should go, or didn't really have much of it was my first time doing stuff, so I didn't mind looking like an idiot. I slept on a lot of couches and floors as well to kind of foster it going. So I think in terms of the question about what impact are you making with CoderDojo earlier, is well, the values that we had with CoderDojo was that like young people would not learn just coding, but they would learn teamwork and presenting and social skills. And this is actually, it's a nice outlet for people whose thing isn't sport, isn't music or other things. We wanted to incorporate self-led learning and peer-led learning, like all this technology stuff, all the tutorials and everything already exists online. So if you can teach yourself from that material, then you're laughing. And there's dozens of programming languages and dozens of frameworks. So the actual kind of like meta skill of self-teaching is more important. We wanted to build things that attendees cared about, that, be it that they could solve a problem in their community, or they're really into horses and wanted to build a website about horses. But we could show that technology could be relevant to them rather than building like a mortgage calculator to, show an implementation of arithmetic and coding or whatever, which is like the case in a lot of third level courses. We wanted to be very inclusive and accessible, that coding and technology can offer a lot of social mobility, and we wanted to really reach out to people who were underserved and didn't have that opportunity. And that was kind of a factor first in Ireland, but then as we went international and we're trying to reach out to different countries, and then we wanted to be open source, so people could take CoderDojo, that they could improve it and contribute back. And also be a place to find out if people hated programming, because you don't actually really have that many outlets to find out if you hate coding. But the big thing was not just to make coders, but to try and make change makers. So that we didn't want kids to go like learn programming and then go try and do a startup of some stupid like photo sharing app or something. We wanted them to take their skills and go into like agriculture or civil service or something, and use those two disciplines to be able to do something new and innovate. And so CoderDojo anyway today is 110 countries and 2,300 clubs and good global spread. So the learnings from that period was that, like, follow the adventure. If you're working on something, and just see what happens, even if you have no idea what you're doing, just be brazen about it. I think the good heuristic is that it should be like pushing a boulder downhill rather than pushing it uphill, that it should pull you rather than you pushing it. And that's how you know you've got something with traction. The other point was articulating your values and mission will attract those who support it, and actually filter out those who aren't a fit, those who, let's say, have ulterior motives or something. You can point to it and say, this is clearly what we're about. And it's easy to share as well. The other thing is, if you want to engage people, like a lot of people want to help or get involved, they just need the right avenue to do it. So by reducing as much friction and creating content and material so that they can engage, they often will. The other thing was seeking out and share learnings, that, each time we would open a new community, we would talk to them after, see what they did different, see what learnings we could take and spread it. And even in building companies, I've been astounded with the amount of people who create products or do something that actually don't talk and do customer interviews or talk to their users, because there's a wealth of knowledge there about their problem set and their requirements and so on. So 3 years in, CoderDojo has a few hundred clubs. It's in about 20 countries. And the foundation, the foundation had like 5 people working there at this point, and it needed leadership, particularly of a management kind, that it needed someone to define success and KPIs and OKRs. And I knew none of what those acronyms meant. I would ultimately find out that KPI means key performance indicator. But I just didn't have that experience or know-how. Conversely, I was pretty burnt out. So I was super anxious. Like, this isn't a shrine to myself here, but I was getting a lot of media attention, didn't quite know how to do it, was terrified about looking stupid or making a mistake, or, there's a whole dynamic. If there's a lot of young people, you don't like basically be a bad influence or do something silly. And then my health was all over the shop. Like, my diet was mostly canned tuna and pizza ordered at 2:45 in the morning. Like, sleep was everywhere, no exercise. I was pretty depressed. And eventually, thanks to somebody who worked and was pretty fed up with me turning up late, gave me the details of a psychologist, and I saw that and was able to untangle all these things. And that was one of the biggest things. But I wasn't in the headspace to do and give the organization what I needed, nor had the skill set. So we hired in a wonderful CEO to replace myself. And then I became an entrepreneur in residence with this venture capital firm. But I had this kind of weird wunderkind, like child prodigy dynamic where they're like, yeah, you know, like he's going to do something great again and it's going to be fantastic. But realistically, they put me in a pedestal and I was like, guys, I'm going to run into these exact same issues again in like 6 months. Like, I don't know what some of these are. I've got gaps. And, you know, I think for the vision that I had for myself and what I want to achieve, I knew I had to get that experience and plug those holes. And every day that I wasn't doing that was the day that I was taking a step back from realizing who I wanted to be. So I spent some time with a mentor of mine in California, did some soul searching. Basically through him, met a guy, an Irish guy who was the CEO of one of the largest e-commerce companies in the Middle East. They needed a technical CTO. The company was like 4 years old, had about 70 or 80 employees. It was pretty established, but they wanted some help on like moving faster, move from like pushing out updates once a week to like once a day and this kind of stuff. So after talking to him for 3 days and hacking in some stuff, I flew to Dubai, did a week of interviews, and then 2 weeks later, much to the surprise of my parents, I moved out at 21 to become CTO of this organization. So the learnings from that was that I think it's good to construct a vision for yourself and where you want to be. And in order to do that, you have to get inspired and expose yourself to a lot of different influences, gather data points, and really construct that. I mean, I could have taken money and tried to build some app or something. And I think that's what happens to a lot of young people who are in that similar position. But realistically, you know, like 9 out of 10 startups fail. And maybe you've just wasted time. It's good experience, but like I knew that I had gaps. And again, I needed to plug those. The other thing was that charity starts at home. Like ultimately self-care is your responsibility in like sense like physical health, mental health, and whatever. And really no one else will regulate you. Like you have to look after that self yourself. So the other thing was that I did learn that if you are in the right headspace, you can, and with the right supports like mentorship and coaching, you can grow and get those skill sets and grow with an organization. But I was just totally mentally shot, so I couldn't. And the other learning was that some people are really good at starting things, other people are really good at scaling things, others are maintaining. So, and those are very different skill sets. You can learn the different skill sets, but I think I knew that at that point I was good at starting things, but not really scaling them or maintaining them. Which is what I wanted to plug. And then the final thing is that network is the most unfair advantage. You know, it'd be nice to believe that we live in a meritocracy, but realistically, people want to give opportunities to people that they like. So I think like networking, trying to have varying experiences and be interesting to people is quite important, and get around, because really after a certain point, all the really good things that happened to me came because people knew me, and then at some point when they saw an opportunity or knew that somebody needed help with something, they could refer me to them. And that's been like time and time again. That's the only warning that I can give there. So the Middle East. So why did I go there? Every white European young technology guy was going to San Francisco. So I figured I should go the opposite direction and do something different. I felt I could fast track a lot of experiences, that this company was already mature, had processes in place, and I could learn from that. And also do something different while I still could. I was also broke because I really messed up my income tax situation while working with CoderDojo, so I needed to plug that gap. So I went from one extreme of like nonprofits and socialism, and the you know, your value of, or your measure of impact being like, you know, how many lives do you touch and imaginations do you delight, to like dollar value being your measure of success. So it's quite a contrast, and refreshing. But basically, the first company, Kobone, that the largest online daily deals company in the Middle East, did that for a year, got my ass kicked, got coaching, added value, moved to like deploying once a week to pushing out updates several times a day. So thank God, because I had big imposter syndrome going in there at that point. I learned the mechanics and levers of business, you know, the customer acquisition costs, average order value, lifetime value, you know, how do you increase the value of companies? And then along with the processes around strategy and KPIs and OKRs, which has been invaluable. Then that company was acquired after a year. I spent a year exploring all sorts of opportunities. Like I became a partner in an online flower store, got involved in a meal prep business, in a pillow business. I sold digital gift cards in Iran, and all sorts of wild stuff. And again, that whole mental model of like 1 out of 5 things is going to work. So you're going to have to go after as many as possible. And then because of our reputation in e-commerce, we met the family who owned the largest chain of supermarkets in Saudi Arabia, and they wanted to bring them online. So without going into too much detail, it was an absolutely crazy challenge. But within 5 months, we got we got online and operational. And actually, I took Arabic lessons for like several weeks so I could copy and paste correctly, because everything had to be in right to left in Arabic as well. And that was pretty self-actualizing as a like developer, because and a CTO of that organization, because we were got into like the top 10 of the App Store in the region. Within a few months, we were doing 1,000+ orders a day with all our own operations and logistics. We had, I think, like 250 people. It was pretty wild. But history repeats itself, and I was feeling pretty burnt out at the end of that stint of those 4 years in Dubai. So effectively, I worked myself to the bone during that period. You can see here these photos on the top, that those are the cans of Red Bulls and cigarettes and copious delivery orders that surrounded my desk. There was one like 10-week period leading up to launch that I was doing like 20 hours a day across like several time zones to try and get the thing out the door. And I was just pretty like shattered. Like even after launch, I went on Ritalin for like several weeks just to like get out of bed and stay functional. So I really did a number of myself. And I think around that as well, that I was surrounded by a lot of values that weren't my own. So there's this expression that you are the sum of the 5 people you spend most time around. And like, you know, I was surrounded by a lot of materialism, a lot of avarice or greed, a lot of people who, you know, place one's gain above someone else's well-being, which wasn't quite, you know, that didn't quite gel with me. And I think suffice to say that not all that glitters is gold, that you can do everything right. You can lead up to everything your side of the bargain. But ultimately someone else might not come through. So eventually, after about 2 years, it was a great experience, learned a lot, self-actualizing a lot, but I wasn't advancing the plot of my personal story anymore. So I left. I basically switched off for 2 months, spent time with friends and family. I slept in. I got my victory royale in Fortnite, as was the times, and then took a year backpacking and doing lots of journaling, reflecting, and basically had a lot of mental indigestion from all these experiences I had over 4 years that I wanted to process. And there was a bunch of learnings from that period. So firstly, sometimes the most successful people are the sickest. So what that means is that like a lot of these people we put in pedestals, they're driven to that extreme because they extract little joy from other things in life at the expense of relationships and whatever. And there's this like mad survivorship bias. So I kind of like saw that a lot of notions that I had in my head about being successful materially or status and whatever, actually there's not a really good and healthy source or source that's conducive to joy or well-being that is driving that. Second one was journey before destination. This idea of, you know, if the outcome that you wanted didn't happen, would it have been a waste? And you're going to spend most of your time on the journey. So it made me kind of rethink about what I engaged with, and that you can control the process, but you can't control the outcome. So irrespective of what I did, will I be happy doing it if I didn't get what I wanted? And again, you inherit the values of the environment around you. So, you know, at a certain point, you have to decide if the environment or what you're working on is aligned to what you want to do. And if it's not, then get out. Another good point is battle testing your value system. So I think, you know, if you go through a lot of situations that test your values or clarify them in stone, it's very useful for later on in life when you're confronted with new situations, because it makes saying no or yes to things very easy, or kind of this, it calibrates this internal compass that you have. So it's not to be shied away from situations that will test these. And then in a similar vein, I think having a level of suffering is good because it calibrates your limits. You don't have to like go like pedal to the metal and destroy yourself like I did, but I think it's not to be shied away from, because it can be a resource and a tool that you can leverage later on, and it can build strength that it will be useful when you take on other challenges. So I knew I wanted to build something again. I didn't know what. I also had a bunch of data points from building organizations that I wanted to validate. So I worked in private equity for just over a year under a mentor, that same guy who I ended up in the Middle East through from when I spent time with in California. So that's network for you again. And basically handled technology and mergers and acquisitions and supported a portfolio of 10 companies. And basically got to look at like all these companies, all their operations, legals and finances, and basically see the blueprints for all of them. And then alongside that, I was thinking about what I wanted to do next and what I was interested in and what kind of felt very vocational to me. And at a certain point, I extracted everything that I wanted from private equity as a learning. And I decided to focus on building a Conjure and like a few other things that I've interests in. So the learning from that was that a useful heuristic for deciding what you want to work on is what am I happy to get no gratification for 2 years working on? I think that's a pretty good idea to say like, okay, I'm willing to commit to this. I'm really interested in it, and the activity in of itself is the reward. And then there's a wider thing of like, I think a direction is based, like, am I willing to commit to this for 10 years? And I think that's not like an immediately obvious thing. I think you have to explore a lot, play around with a bunch of different areas, do some like A/B testing, see what you like and don't like. And that's also a good way to think about the stuff that you don't like, that it has value as well for calibrating you. And then there's also this expression that ties into that about like learn in your 20s and earn in your 30s, or exploration versus exploitation mode. Exploration, like map the surface area of things you're interested in or might be interested in. Once you find what you do like, then you go into exploitation mode, where you just like zero in and focus on it and extract everything out from it. And I've gone through those periods of exploration and exploitation. And then finally, I think once you get a bunch of experiences and data points, then reflecting on it and articulating your values and ambitions is a really great exercise. And because once you do that, then you can filter out everything that's not aligned to it. So now when I get offers or different things come my way, no matter how lucrative they are, if it's not aligned to the vision that I have for myself or what I want to see play out, I'll say no. Then again, let's see what happens when I've got children and a whole bunch of dependents, and maybe I'll change my mind. But I'm still on my journey. I'm still optimizing for health, wealth, happiness, and flourishing, given all this. So I'm very going to quickly run through some points that I think are important to carving a path. And again, I'm going to define this as pursuing something with unknown outcomes. I think the first question is this really what you want? Again, like pursuing the unknown isn't for everybody. There's a lack of security and a lot of uncertainty. Some people don't have the opportunity or have dependents, and it's not a fit. The other thing to note is that life has many other things to offer. A lot of people derive all their joy from relationships and health and passions. They don't feel the need to build a company to try and get some sort of like external validation because of material success. So, it's just one part of life. The other thing is that known paths mostly have known outcomes. And if you're happy with the known outcomes, then fantastic. Unknown paths have variable outcomes. They can be either really great or really bad, depending. I think the other thing to note about our society is that media puts youth and utility on pedestals. There's always some story about some 20-year-old who raises however many million and is going to change with the face of whatever, because I think that's a whole narrative that sells and gets clicks. But most successful individuals are in their like mid 30s or 40s when they come to prominence. And that's because they've had like a decade or almost 2 decades of experience and learnings and research. So the other thing is that doing it for the wrong reasons can end in tears. You see a lot of people who kind of want to build something because they've got a chip in their shoulder or something to prove. But that's a very turbulent experience I've found in my journey. And I think the best way to think about it is if you are going to do something and go after something with uncertainty, that you should come from it from a place of love and not a place of fear, that you really love it. You love the adventure and seeking it. And that's the most sustainable way to go. The second thing is connecting and sharing. If there is a space that's unknown to you or a space you're trying to break into, then I think you got to connect with the people who are in that space. And a lot of that is just cold outreach, emailing somebody you don't know or trying to meet up with people for coffee that you don't know. The worst comes to worst, they're just going to turn you down or not reply to you. And a lot of people are afraid to do that. And the thing is, the only thing that gets hurt if that's the case is your ego. And that's if you let it. A good way that I've worked with that is remapping, not trying, to being more painful than being turned down. Conversely, getting mentors, not just those who are where you ultimately want to be, but are 1 or 2 years ahead of you, who the experience is fresh to. And then sharing your work and proactively asking for feedback and being easy to give feedback to. A lot of people who are emotional about getting feedback, a lot of people just ultimately won't give them feedback and they stagnate. And then everything that you put out there, again, as I said earlier, is like a fishing line or a hook to attract. And that's still pretty scary and vulnerable. So I think you build up to that. I think another thing is you have to observe your relationship with the discomfort. Humans don't like the unknown. They subconsciously will avoid it and self-sabotage. You see this plays out in romantic relationships a lot, where people think that they're going to get hurt by the person that they're dating. So they say that they ended prematurely or act emotionally distant. Same thing happens with this kind of stuff. They'll shy away. The unknowns have unknown upside and downside. So I think the trick is to pick things with high upside and low downside. Gambling all your life savings in roulette has a pretty big downside, where cold emailing somebody, the downside is that they might just say no or not respond to you, but the upside is that they might have a conversation that changes your life. So a good way to remap discomfort is to growth, that the feeling of being uncomfortable is the sensation of growing and experiencing something new. And often when we've experienced discomfort, it's not, or when we're fearful of something, it's that we're fearful of the sensation of discomfort rather than the thing itself. I'm not afraid to tell somebody that they're doing a bad job because I'm going to hurt their feelings. I'm afraid because it's going to make my life difficult or sad. That's not always the case. That sounds very unempathetic. But if you get used to the sensation of discomfort and embrace it, then it makes a lot of things a lot easier. And our brain also lies to us and just puts it out of proportion. So it says that this bad sensation is going to last forever. But realistically, it's only going to last like 15 minutes, an hour, and you're going to forget about it next week. And everyone else is going to have forgotten about it next week. Failure and resilience. Best way, and failure manifests its way in different ways, or it's subjective, but the best way to go about it is to fail fast. So the sooner that you're wrong, the sooner you can get to being right, and you fail upwards, you fail your way to success. And another thing is, if you're embarking with something that has unknowns and that's a little bit intimidating, if you're good at course correcting, then you're fine. Like as you get more data points or more clarity builds, you can just change course if needs be early on. So that's why I'm a lot more confident in going into things that are unknown, because I know I can just like pivot or turn at any point. And then also another way to look at failure is not as failure as we know it, but as practice. That there's no such thing as failure; it's only learning, and that it's a resource that you can use to your advantage. I think the mental model that figure skaters use is that you have to fall like 10,000 times in order to land one jump, and there's a willingness to that. So if if you're not willing to fail, you can't be successful. But again, that depends on your definition of failure. Like I don't have a definition of failure. Everything I fail at is a learning to me, so I win. So I'm always winning. And I think on the other side of this, you have people who have a fixed mindset. So people who insulate themselves from failure, they don't put themselves out there. They worry about their appearances and ego, which kind of leads me on to my second last slide. Which is the good news is that all of this is in your head. When it comes to imposter syndrome, and this is something I've particularly dealt with a lot, and especially when I was young or younger, still deal with it today, is that imposter syndrome is a miswired self-preservation mechanism that doesn't really serve us anymore. It used to be applicable that when we were in the tribe, if we made a fool of ourselves, we would be cast out and we would starve. But I think the self-image that we have is important. If you perceive yourself as smart or talented, you're going to do a lot of things to maintain that image. But the thing that I do is I perceive myself as foolish, and then I'm never really worried about making a fool of myself. So in summation, after my very quick talking and running over time, success is a funnel. The more you put into the top of the funnel, the more output you'll have at the bottom. Collect data points and improve your mental model and build experiences as much as you can. Don't worry about individual successes, only the series. Some will be good, some will be bad. Be willing to suck and look foolish and learn and grow. The expression I really love is that see much, suffer much, and study much is the path to wisdom. And I think the final thing is the reason that you would take this unknown path is that you can manifest the reality that you want. And that can be a reality for yourself or for your family. That can be a reality for others or for society, and how we treat people or the standard of living that people have. But that's probably the most powerful thing from it, that you can manifest that you want. So thank you so much for listening to that. All right, where do we go from here?
Brilliant. Thank you very much, James. I might just ask you a very quick question, because I think you've incorporated some of the questions from attendees into your speech already. Do you think that being self-taught is one of your biggest strengths?
I think that it's an incredibly powerful tool to be able to. Now it could also be like that Dunning-Kruger effect, where stupid people don't know that they're stupid and perceive themselves as smart. But I have a dangerous amount of confidence that I can be anything and learn anything if I spend enough time. And I think that there's a Pareto principle to a lot of stuff, that like 20% of material will give you 80% of benefit. So for me, I'm a generalist. I like exploring different areas and trying to get something off the ground. And when it comes to doing something really detailed, you more than likely can hire somebody at that point who has that depth. So I think if you're a generalist and you want to have cover a wide surface area, then self-teaching is fantastic. But there's definitely necessity for people to be deep in certain areas. And you can't like institutions hold that position. You can't replace it. So like I wouldn't want a autodidact surgeon operating on me to maybe summarize that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, James, for the time you took today to speak with us and for answering our questions.